A little bit about Kung Fu.
Well, Kung Fu is originated in China. It is the ancestor of karate and jiu-jitsu. It's more of a complete system and it's more fluid. By that I mean it's more flowing. There is continuity in movement instead of one movement, two movement, and then stop.
Bruce Lee's body lay on a rattan couch in Betty Ting Pei's Hong Kong apartment as the neon glow of the streets filtered through the window. Within hours, Bruce's wife, Linda Lee Caldwell, producer Raymond Chow, actress Betty Ting Pei, and pathologist Donald Teare found themselves at the center of swirling rumors no explanation could quell. Was it a simple headache tablet, or something more sinister, that claimed the dragon just as he was poised for Hollywood's summit? On July 20, 1973, humid Hong Kong was in full summer heat when Lee, after an afternoon martial arts demonstrations, joined Betty Ting Pei for a last-minute script review. Complaining of a headache, he took an Equagesic tablet, aspirin plus meprobamate, and stretched out on a rattan couch, asking to be awakened shortly. 2 hours later, when he failed to rouse, Raymond Chow discovered his friend unresponsive. An ambulance rushed him to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but at 11:30 p.m., Lee was pronounced dead on arrival. The South China Morning Post carried the headline, "Dragon Dies" in inch-high type. The official verdict, cerebral edema, death by misadventure. The unofficial chorus, it screamed, impossible. Dragons don't just fall asleep and never wake up. Half a century later, speculation still flickers like neon on Nathan Road. Did an allergic reaction kill him? Was it heat stroke, triad revenge, or a family curse later echoed in Bruce's son Brandon's on-set shooting? Tonight, we roll life's film from its first frame, hunting the droplet that tipped an overflowing cup. Bruce Lee entered the world in San Francisco's Jackson Street Hospital on November 27, 1940. A breech baby delivered in the Year of the Dragon, a sign of strength in Chinese astrology. His father, Cantonese opera star Li Hoi Chun, wrapped the newborn in red silks and named him Jun Fan, which means return again. 4 months later, the family returned to Hong Kong, docking in Kowloon, still peaceful then but soon to fall under Japanese attack. Food ration carts would shrink weekly, and little Bruce learned early that agility meant survival. Dodge shrapnel in looming air raids, climb laundry poles, and shadow his father backstage among sword dance rehearsals. Bruce's earliest stage memories were not of applause, but of the cavernous hush just before the curtain rose. He watched his father powder cheeks, knot silken sashes, and whirl feathered spears in the dim wings. There, Bruce mimicked every step, turning discarded fan ribs into miniature swords, earning the nickname Sai-Fan, or Little Phoenix, from veteran actors who swore the boy's footwork echoed adult precision. That same backstage wrestle of nerves would later guide him to treat every film set as a living theater, complete with an unseen audience. Energy surged through every joint. Doctors prescribed swimming. He cannonballed into the harbor even when typhoon flags whipped overhead. At school, he bounced chalk on knuckles, disrupted arithmetic, mimicked teachers until the classroom dissolved into laughter. When older street gangs cornered him outside a dim sum stall and split his lip, Bruce tasted humiliation and decided pain belonged to someone else next time. During his teenage years, Lee joined the Junction Street 8 Tigers, a rooftop crew that practiced kicks on laundry lines and settled turf fights with bare knuckles in tenement stairwells. Kowloon's best street fighters trained under Yip Man, whose Wing Chun school was tucked away above a quiet shop. Lee joined around 1958 at the recommendation of fellow students and drilled chain punches until his palms bled. Speed came first, discipline followed. At about 17, he tested his new skills in the Hong Kong Schoolboys Boxing Championship, picking apart several opponents and knocking out British boxer Gary Elms in the third round to claim the trophy. That same year, Lee landed a part in the Cantonese language film The Orphan, playing a knife-wielding street urchin seeking redemption. Censors snipped the fiercest cuts, but reviewers marveled at the coiled intensity of the 18-year-old, a wild dragon barely tamed in a youth's body. Lee pocketed the modest fee and spent it on second-hand 16mm swashbuckler reels, studying how Douglas Fairbanks vaulted across the screen, a visual trick he'd weaponized in Fist of Fury. Off-screen, he traded kicks for cha-cha. Lee glided across teak floors, counting beats in Cantonese as he taught himself 108 steps. In 1958, the South China Morning Post crowned him Hong Kong's cha-cha champion. an irony critics would later savor when Kun Do's footwork drew jazz rhythm comparisons. But Kowloon's streets remained dangerous. After a rooftop brawl left an attacker hospitalized, police warned Grace Lee her son faced juvenile detention. Determined to save him, she sold her wedding ring and bought Bruce a third-class Pan Am ticket, sending the 18-year-old westward to America. September 1959, Pier 91. Seattle rain slanted sideways across rusted cranes while Bruce lugged 2 suitcases and about $100. Ruby Chow, a family friend, let him bunk in the attic above her Cantonese eatery in exchange for busboy shifts. Mornings, he cleared tables and scrubbed walks. Afternoons, he hustled off to Edison Technical School to finish his diploma, later auditing philosophy and English classes at the University of Washington. In the evenings, he shoved aside restaurant tables to drill Wing Chun moves into wide-eyed busboys. Word spread through Fraternity Row. There's an Asian kid who hits like a jackhammer. Curious linebackers swapped beer for lessons, dropping $1 an hour for stances and $2 for sticky hand drills. Tuition paid for itself when Bruce officially registered his business as the Junfan Gung Fu Institute and plastered the campus with flyers, sidekick silhouettes and all. Bruce's Seattle alchemy hit the mainland, and one evening a blonde co-ed named Linda Emery peeked in, mesmerized by his swirling forearms. She tried a trial class, slipped into horse stance, and walked away both bruised and smitten. 1963 Seattle wasn't keen on interracial dating, but Bruce disarmed every stare with a grin and a friendly, "How are you?" They tied the knot on August 17, 1964, in an Oakland Lutheran church. Linda in a borrowed brocade, Bruce in a $30 skinny suit and a loosely knotted tie. Weeks later, Ed Parker's Long Beach International Karate Championships thrust Bruce onto America's radar. In that packed 8,000-seat auditorium, he unleashed the 1-inch punch on volunteer Bob Baker, sending him skidding backward across the mat. Flashbulbs popped. The host's official 16mm footage morphed into an 8mm bootlegs passed hand-to-hand under high school bleachers nationwide. Hollywood hairstylist Jay Sebring mailed a reel to producer William Dozier with one line: "Get this man on TV before the Japanese beat you to it." The Locked Broom Challenge, 1964. Success breeds resistance. When some San Francisco traditionalists learned Lee was teaching non-Chinese students, whispers of cultural betrayal rippled through Chinatown. Word reached Wang Jackman, a northern Shaolin master teaching in the neighborhood, after mutual acquaintances delivered Lee's open challenge. The two squared off in Lee's cramped Oakland school in late 1964. According to Linda Lee's stopwatch, it was over in about 3 minutes. Bruce unleashed a flurry of straight punches, drove Wang to the rear of the room until he motioned for mercy, and then staggered away, chest heaving from being unusually winded. That night, between bouts of coughing and scribbling in his notebook, Lee admitted, "My classical training held me back." He began tearing down rigid forms, mixing Wing Chun's centerline theory with boxing, fencing, and philosophical insights from his college readings. These restless sketches and late-night sparring sessions planted the first seeds of Jeet Kune Do, the way of intercepting fist, even though Bruce wouldn't christen it by name until 1967. Dozier's Green Hornet swooped onto ABC in September 1966. Teenagers tuned in for masked crusader Britt Reed, but stayed glued for Kato's Blur of Limbs. In Hong Kong, it officially ran as The Kato Show. Yet after 26 episodes, ABC yanked it for too violent content. Undeterred, Lee grabbed small parts such as surfer thugs and silent henchmen before auditioning for Warner's new pilot Kung Fu. He pitched in his rich Mandarin-flavored English. Executives loved the concept, but balked at an Asian lead's accent, handing the role to David Carradine instead. Bruce smiled, swallowed the sting, then scribbled in his diary, "They want the dish without the cook." Not one to be sidelined, he shot home movie demos, 2-finger push-ups, double nunchaku twirls, lightning-fast punch sequences, and mailed reels to every producer on his list. Silence. Frustration turned physical in 1970, when a weightlifting mishap tore his 4th sacral nerve. Doctors warned him of permanent paralysis, but Bruce defiantly scrawled "Defy" on his hospital rail, crammed Krishnamurti and Zen into bedside reading, and visualized every healing cell. 6 months later, he was back on his feet, kicking a heavy bag strung from a wire, then filming backyard demos to prove he'd never lost an ounce of speed. Hollywood finally woke up when Steve McQueen caught wind of Lee's backyard demo reels and gave him a ring. Soon, Bruce was drilling McQueen, James Garner, and a 7-inch to NBA Titan Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in his Sunset Boulevard garage, charging a cool $275 an hour, the going rate for a new Triumph motorcycle. Kareem later admitted Lee barked, "Boards don't hit back," as he demanded head-high sidekicks in every rep. That star-studded roster became Bruce's ultimate bargaining chip. Then came the Hong Kong call. At Kai Tak Airport, Golden Harvest mogul Raymond Chow greeted Lee amid a frenzy of flashbulbs. Shaw Brothers had lowballed him at $2,000 per picture, which Lee politely turned down. Chow countered with a 2-film deal at $15,000, 10 for the Big Boss and 5 more on the next, plus creative control. The Big Boss shot in 4 sweltering weeks in Thailand. Lee gulped water between takes and even improvised broken bottle defenses. When it hit theaters, it grossed nearly $50 million worldwide, shattering Hong Kong box office records. Fist of Fury followed in 1972, raising the local haul to over 4 million Hong Kong dollars, and in its finale, Lee smashes the Japanese dojo sign, charges a line of riflemen, and freezes mid-air amid gunfire. By way of the Dragon, with Lee directing, writing, and trading blows with Chuck Norris in a Roman Coliseum, Hollywood was begging him back. Warner Bros. Then greenlit Enter the Dragon as a landmark U.S. Hong Kong co-production. In pre-production, Lee turned Golden Harvest's cramped offices into mission control, insisting on real Shaolin monks, vetoing any rubber props, rewriting scenes nightly to sharpen the social justice edge, and personally storyboarding the Hall of Mirrors sequence when Warner balked, securing that iconic set for just $8,000. A future cinema classic was born. Heat, Hurt, and Homemade Tonics, 1971 to 1973. Bruce Lee treated his body like an ultra-elite athlete and his mind like a philosopher's canvas. His private journals brim with 5 a.m. heavy back blitzes, marathon 12-hour shoots, midday weight circuit gauntlets, afternoon choreography powwows, and midnight essays on Zen and Heraclitus. He'd slashed animal fats, breads, and refined sugars from his menu, fueling up on lean beef and liver stir-fries, raw egg protein shakes with powdered milk, carrot, celery, apple elixirs, and bee pollen and royal jelly tonics. Ever the tinkerer, Bruce wired EMS pads to his abs between script pages, generating involuntary contractions in pursuit of razor-sharp definition. A 1970 weightlifting mishap ruptured his 4th sacral nerve. He battled spasms with hashish edibles and popped Equagesic, his trusty aspirin meprobamate combo, whenever tension struck. On May 10, 1973, midway through Enter the Dragon dialogue looping, Lee went down with cerebral edema and was rushed to Baptist Hospital. Doctors drew off the swelling with IV mannitol. He was walking out in a few days, already screaming crisper fight beats rather than taking it easy. All that sweat demanded hydration. Bruce routinely gulped gallons of water, convinced it flushed out lactic acid, only for modern kidney experts to warn that chronic overhydration plus his low-solute juice-heavy regimen could trigger silent hyponatremia. Day of no return, July 20, 1973. Hong Kong's summer heat was merciless by noon. Inside his study at 41 Cumberland Road, Bruce was shirtless, lean as a panther, with veins pulsing over single-digit body fat, rehearsing Game of Deadlines with Raymond Chow. At 2 p.m., they hailed a taxi to Betty Ting Pei's apartment to map out her cameo. Betty saw the fatigue in his eyes. Bruce admitted a throbbing migraine. By early evening, he'd downed an Equagesic tablet with a cold drink and stretched out. Chow dashed off to fetch Linda for dinner, only to return and find Bruce utterly still. They dialed 999, but Hong Kong's snarled streets held up the ambulance. When medics finally fought through the traffic, Bruce was already cyanotic. At Queen Elizabeth Hospital, doctors pumped IV mannitol into him. No response. He was pronounced dead on arrival at 11:30 p.m. Linda arrived minutes later and collapsed beside him as the city lost its dragon. Autopsy, inquest, and quick cremation. Donald Teare, Scotland Yard recommended pathologist, carried out a meticulous, multi-hour autopsy. No skull fractures, no aneurysm. Toxicology confirmed the aspirin and meprobamate in Equagesic were far below lethal levels. Official cause? Hypersensitivity to Equagesic leading to cerebral edema. Hong Kong Star Ferry commuters rubbed their eyes in disbelief. Meanwhile, magazines like the 70s churned out every wild theory that could be imagined. First, we have the sweat gland theory. Several months before his passing, Bruce Lee quietly underwent an endoscopic thoracic sympathectomy to zap the sweat glands from his underarms, purely a cosmetic tweak to combat dank pits under hot studio lights. In late 1972, he traded perspiration for poise, but the human body boasts over 2 million sweat glands. Axillary removal barely dents your cooling system. Biographer Matthew Polly later hypothesized this nip might have nudged his heat tolerance over the edge. Yet physiologists point out sweat simply reroutes through the remaining pores, hardly a death sentence. The surgery gave conspiracy buffs a juicy twist, but medically it lacked the muscle to topple the dragon. Others said he had a triad fallout. Whispers in the alleyways claimed loan shark enforcers tied to the triads punished Lee for refusing to hand over film profit points, ruthless mobsters settling scores in the shadows. Yet, when Robert Lee hired ex-Hong Kong detective Philip Chan in the mid-1980s to comb police logs and studio ledgers, not a scrap of triad involvement surfaced. No threats, no extortion records, no clandestine meetings, just an unblemished trail. The legend of triad retribution may thicken the mystery, but the evidence remains as empty as a dojo at dawn. Some martial arts mythmakers swore that Yip Ching, a Wing Chun master, whispered to know the secret dim mak, or touch of death in English, had delivered a delayed point strike that festered until Bruce collapsed. The dim mak legend even fueled 1980s magazine fodder, but credible historians and eyewitnesses find no record of any lethal strike, nor any grudges held by Yip Ching himself. Dim mak lives on in wuxia tales, not in the sober notes of Dr. Donald Teare or the recollections of Lee's students. And many tell tales of a rushed cremation. Tabloids' pages blazed that Raymond Chow raced Bruce's body to the furnace within 48 hours, purportedly to dodge rioting fans. In truth, Hong Kong laid Lee to rest on July 25, 1973, 5 days after his death, amid a public memorial thronged by 25,000 mourners. Before shipping his ashes to Seattle, Chow moved swiftly to protect Lee's legacy, but not at the cost of proper ceremonies. Those fevered tales of a midnight pyre belong in Pulp Fiction, not Kowloon's funeral parlor. Teare archived only the standard slides of brain and tissue, yet conspiracy buffs cried cover-up. Betty Ting Pei herself fanned the flames, first insisting he'd died alone, then admitting they'd both drifted off on her couch. Even Chow's timing came under fire. Biographers note a baffling 45-minute gap between his two police statements, and Betty's brief call to an unlisted number, alleged by some to be a high-ranking fixer, still hums through every conspiracy podcast. Decades of dissection. There are decades of dissection. In the 1990s, Bruce's brother Robert Lee, never convinced by the coroner's ruling, hired former Hong Kong police detective Philip Chan to reopen the investigation. Chan's exhaustive review turned up zero evidence of any triad conspiracy. Then, in March 1993, tragedy struck again when Bruce's son Brandon Lee bled to death after a bullet fragment lodged in his prop revolver on the Crow set. Headlines leapt on the Lee curse angle, reviving whispers of hexes old and new. Fast forward to 2018, biographer Matthew Polly assembled medical experts who argued that Lee's fatal cerebral edema was worsened by heat stroke, aggravated by his late 72 sympathectomy to remove underarm sweat glands, and compounded by anti-inflammatory drugs. Finally, in March 2022, a team of nephrologists published Who Killed Bruce Lee? The Hyponatremia Hypothesis in the Clinical Kidney Journal, positing that Lee's habit of downing gallons of water, paired with low solute intake and multiple medications impairing renal water excretion, diluted his blood sodium and triggered the brain swelling that proved fatal. Each fresh theory lit up rabbit holes, yet none could fully bury the specter of earlier legends. Legacy in perpetual motion. Enter the Dragon burst into theaters in Hong Kong on July 26, 1973, just 6 days after its star's untimely death, and roared into Los Angeles on August 19, 1973, 1 month on from Lee's last bow. Made for a lean $850,000, it spun into a global juggernaut, topping over $400 million at the box office. The fallout was pure kung fu mania. Toy nunchaku sold out overnight, martial arts schools sprouted from San Francisco to Sheffield, and Hollywood action scripts quietly grafted in Lee's high-octane chops. Meanwhile, Jeet Kune Do's gospel of interception and minimal movement fed the roots of what would become MMA. So much so that UFC boss Dana White calls Lee the father of mixed martial arts. Back home, the Bruce Lee Foundation has stayed just as combative, dragging copycats into court. In 2019, Shannon Lee's estate sued a Chinese fast food chain for slapping Bruce's likeness on its logo without permission. And as AI deepfake tutorials pop up on TikTok, celebrity estates, Bruce Lee's included, are turning to right of publicity suits under state law to block digital double dealing. In every era, whether on 35mm celluloid or in streams of pixels, the dragon's legacy refuses to rest, proving that true legends never fade, they just evolve. After image. Visit Lakeview Cemetery at dawn and you'll find fresh offerings, flowers, candles, even miniature nunchaku lying beside the striking granite headstone of Bruce and Brandon Lee. Pilgrims trace their fingers over the carved dragons, whisper Cantonese prayers, or simply stand in reverent silence. So what finally cracked the dragon's armor? An allergic reaction? Overheated organs? Or the brutal calculus of pushing a human vessel past its limit until one tiny pill tipped the balance? Maybe the answer folds into Lee's own cone. To change with change is the changeless state. Only when you find stillness in motion do you glimpse the universal rhythm. We play his films in slow motion, hunting for secrets, yet every frame still evaporates as fast as it arrives. Cast your mind back to that Long Beach stage in 1964, when Lee's one-inch punch buckled Bob Baker. Physics can map the force, but can't charge the collective gasp that rippled through the auditorium. And no coroner's report can fully map the moment life exited the man who taught us to be water. Which theory resonates with you? Sensitivity, heat, vendetta, or fate? Whose script penned Bruce Lee's final act? Drop your take below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.